all mute yourselves if you're not already muted. Sandy, don't mute yourself.
No.
No. Okay. We are so fortunate today to have Sandy giving this book review. She's always an enthusiastic supporter of so many wonderful projects, organizations, and she was our Congregant of the Year. As far as I'm concerned, she's just one of the most wonderful people I've ever met. And I'm so glad to know you. And I'm so glad that you agreed to review this book. Before I turn this over to Sandy, I want to remind you that our next book review will be March the 11th of 2021. And it's going to be The Dressmaker of Kahir Kahana. And our member Judy Myers will be reviewing this. The book looks like this. You could get it in paperback. And without further ado, I say here's Fruma Sandy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm happy to be here with you tonight. I want to welcome you to Borough Park, Brooklyn, New York, where our story takes place. And I'm just setting the tone as Fruma Sarah. That's my Jewish name, Sarah. So I just want to know, but first, thank you, Susan, for the beautiful, beautiful introduction. But I must tell you, I thought about getting out of my commitment to do this book review because, as everybody knows, I'm a clown and not a literary genius. However, I did like the book, so I persevered. I just wanted to see who likes the book. So I believe David is going to be able to put a survey out there and we can see who liked it. And you can just check off and who loved it, or did they think it was just okay, or you just didn't like it, and then press submit and we'll make a poll and then we'll check it again at the end just to see everybody's thoughts on the book. So I want to tell you about the author, Naomi Reagan. She's an American-born novelist, playwright, and journalist, and she's lived in Jerusalem since 1971. She has published 11 international best-selling novels and is the author of a hit play called Women's Minion that has been performed more than 500 times in Israel's National Theater, as well as in the United States and Argentina. Naomi has written for the Jerusalem Post and other publications in Israel and abroad, as well as she has a mailing list about Israel and Jewish issues. She's an Orthodox woman, feminist, and iconoclast. Naomi is a tireless advocate for women's rights in Israel, waging a relentless campaign against domestic violence and bias in rabbinical courts, as well as a successful Supreme Court case against gender segregation on Israeli buses. She is a sought-after lecturer all over the world. Her novels include The Ghost of Hannah Mendez, The Covenant, The Sisters Weiss, and The Devil in Jerusalem. They've all been international bestsellers. Her weekly email columns on Life in the Middle East are read by thousands of subscribers worldwide. An American, she's lived in Jerusalem for the past 40 years and was voted one of the 3 most popular authors in Israel. So I told you I loved this book. To me, it's a fabulous story. Oh, and
Sandy, I'd asked you to unmute. There you go.
Okay, so I was researching Naomi and the book, and I found her website, and she said that she would consider speaking to women's groups. And I thought, wow, I would have the coup d'etat of all the book reviews. I would have Naomi Reagan in person talking to us by Zoom, of course. But of course, lo and behold, due to technology and the user error, I wasn't able to do it. However, I don't know if anybody has seen her in person, but I do have some clips of her Zoom meeting. So David is going to show that to us right now, her first introduction of Naomi Reagan.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to, I guess, my new YouTube channel. I got this idea because I've had a lot of fans who've read my new book, An Unorthodox Match. I'll show you a picture. And in Hebrew, Samalacha Nafshi, which is my 11th book, who have been asking me to Skype with them. And there's a bit of a problem, you know, because I live in Jerusalem. Some of you may not know that, and there's sort of a 7-8 hour time difference. So I said I would do a video and respond to questions that book clubs and fans have had about this book and try to reach you this way. So I'm inviting you into my office where I do this work and where I've written this, which is my 11th book. And I hope to answer some of your questions, and please feel free to write me and to visit my website, naomireagan.com. And for all of you to whom this is the first book of mine that you have read, you know, with Shtisel coming out, people have just discovered the ultra-Orthodox world, and I think Shtisel is a great, you know, Netflix show. But I have to say that in 1989, I actually set this ball rolling. So all of you who love Shtisel, please start reading my books. The first one was Jephthah's Daughter, published in 1989, and followed by Sotah and the Sacrifice of Tamar, and all of my other books until the very latest one, if this world of the ultra-Orthodox Jew interests you and you'd like to learn more about it. So here's the interview, and here are my answers.
So she seems like somebody we'd all like to get to know, right? And the entire interview is very nice. So if you ever have time, just Google her, Naomi Reagan. So upon reading the reviews of the book, I found they were almost all unanimously positive. The only negative comments were from a person who said she was disappointed that the glossary was not at the beginning of the book instead of the end, which could have been very helpful. One said the plot was relatively predictable, but still worth reading. Another said it was like taking a trip to a foreign country, as it expands our knowledge and challenges our beliefs. And we are exposed to other religions besides Judaism in the book, including Catholicism, Buddhism, and Sikhism. I thought it was a wonderful book. Such wonderful characters, such colorful characters. One reviewer said, and I agree, that it was so well written that we could smell the challah, feel the heat from the candles on Shabbat, and clearly see each character. It's somewhat a Cinderella story and a bit reminiscent of The Sound of Music. But let me tell you, there is a lot of tsuris in this novel. Tsuris with a capital T, and I'm sure if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. Leading the charge is family dysfunction, economic reverses, bigotry, and hypocrisy. Each main character is burdened with so much tragedy and anguish that we have to have Rahmanas for them. We have to feel for them. We have to deeply feel for them all. I know most of you have read it, and you know that Leah is the 34-year-old main character. She is a woman beyond the wall, as they say, with a Band-Aid covered tattoo, born out of wedlock from a one-night stand, to a mother who dressed like a biker chick and was now shacked up with a lapsed Sikh. And we meet her when she is applying to Rabbi Weintraub for a women's study program for newly observant Orthodox Jews. Can she succeed? Oi, I can't help it, but oi. She had a failed career and witnessed the tragedy of her perfect fiancé dying in front of her. She always knew, though, she was a Jew and there was a God, and wanted to return to her heritage and find more meaning. She was close with her ultra-Orthodox grandmother when she was young. Yaakov is a 40-year-old Torah scholar whose wife died tragically, and while having to take over but not being able to take time away from his studies, Torah study, he doesn't see that his home and family is unraveling and that the whole household is in turmoil. Leah has a broken heart, and Yaakov has a broken heart. There is a Hasidic saying, there is nothing as whole as a broken heart. They both had life experiences that could have broken them. Death of a loved one, rejection, insecurity, and loss. But such experiences can also make one more whole and stronger as human beings, which is what happened in both of their cases. Yaakov is a very good man. He's a good neshama. He is kind and caring and a good father. He had high morals and found he could not bring himself to become a schnorrer or a beggar when he realized he needed to work to support his family. He is so caring and sensitive. He is happy for the ants to share the crumbs from his sandwich when he's sitting, waiting to go in to ask for charity. We learn Yaakov's wife, Zissel, who was pretty, happy, and lively, suffered from postpartum depression so badly after each childbirth that she couldn't take it anymore. And she committed suicide, that we really don't learn till later in the book. Shandala, the teenage daughter, who was really still a child, is suffering terrible with guilt and missing her mother and having to take over the household duties, and that she is making life miserable for her siblings. She takes it out on her 5-year-old sister, Chasia, who is developing terrible problems, anxiety and stomach problems. Yaakov's ultra-Orthodox mother, Fruma Esther, who, with a half a century of wrinkles, but still considers herself a queen, as she is the widow of a noted rabbi and sister of a noted rabbi. But she's so sad about her family that she has had a relentless flow of sorrow that has dampened her pillow and her prayer book, and she just thinks she can't go on forever. She has revelations in the story when she realizes how wrong she was for not insisting that Zissel go to the doctor or the hospital and get more help. She thought she was being punished by God, taking away her eyesight, but she realized God was also merciful and there was no sin for which a person could not repent. And what was true repentance, but being in the same situation and acting differently. She learned from a Holocaust survivor's daughter who she meets, who lost her daughter, that when asked her, how is there a God? Is there a God if he could take away their children? The woman replies, yes, there is a God because he's there to help us get back up and go on. We're also introduced to Meir, Yaakov's study partner, who is his closest relationship next to his children, and another long string of colorful characters we meet along the way of Leah's friends and roommates and fellow students, and it's a very colorful story. Cheryl Howard, Lola, she's still Lola, she hasn't converted yet when we meet Cheryl. She's Lola's bleached blonde, midriff-bearing mother. Her life has not been going so well either. Her husband died suddenly, and she is living with Ravi, a long-haired turban Sikh whose own family is estranged and living back in India. And did I mention that Cheryl ran away from her overbearing ultra-Orthodox parents when she was 19 and joined a group of hippies in a trash metal band? Colorful characters indeed. However, the adage like mother, like daughter does apply to an extent, though the purpose is somewhat opposite. Cheryl rebelled from her strict Orthodox upbringing and Lola was rebelling for her life, searching for more depth and meaning. Cheryl was always saying Lola was becoming a born again, and she would have rather her become a Hare Krishna than an Orthodox Jew. She possessed the typical misconceptions about Orthodoxy, and in her interview, Naomi Reagan gives her view of these misconceptions. So let's listen to what she has to say about that.
Well, I think that the biggest misconception is that the ultra-Orthodox community is homogeneous, and that everybody in the ultra-Orthodox community lives a certain way, works a certain way, treats women a certain way, and nothing could be further from the truth. Ultra-Orthodoxy is an umbrella term, and it encompasses Jews from Ashkenazi backgrounds, Sephardic Jews, Hasidic Jews, Jews from very ultra extreme sects like the Neturei Karta, which don't recognize the state of Israel. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception. I think also there's this idea that ultra-Orthodox Jews make women their slaves, and women are barefoot and pregnant and in the kitchen, and that more or less they don't really have a say about what goes on in their lives. This too is a tremendous misconception. Ultra-Orthodox men and women live very individual lives, and in fact, the whole idea of women being stuck at home, giving birth and not having lives of their own is the biggest misconception of all, because if it wasn't for ultra-Orthodox women going out to work and supporting their large families, there wouldn't be an ultra-Orthodox community. It is more or less, and I say this in some ways with pride in what women have accomplished, and in some ways I say it with a great deal of sadness, that truly the community exists on the backs of women and their backbreaking work. And I think there needs to be certainly more equality in that community, and who supports these very large and beautiful families. The next question is,
Okay. So I thought that was very interesting what she had to say, and she knows firsthand because she has lived there. Also, Borough Park could be considered a character in the novel as well. It's an isolated religious community with strict rules and a penchant for welcoming converts while secretly excluding them from communal life. Borough Park is home to one of the largest Orthodox Jewish communities outside of Israel, and one of the largest concentrations of Jews in the United States. The average number of children in Orthodox and Haredi families is 6.72. The Lehman family, Yaakov, had 5 children before imploding. Borough Park is experiencing a sharp growth in population and is an economically diverse neighborhood. The essence and background of the book is the social code of the ultra-Orthodox that is the catalyst for the behavior of the characters. The essence of the conflict is the rule that the Torah says you are to welcome the stranger. The community Leah longed to join preached acceptance, but they rejected her, the Baal Tshuva, thinking she would never be good enough. She would backslide to her old ways, and she just wasn't like them. They did everything they could to sabotage her being accepted. Here, Ms. Reagan tells us firsthand in her own words, her experience of this.
would a convert be accepted into the community with similar prejudices as Leah is in my book? Well, we're talking not only about converts, but in my book, we're talking about Jews who are newly religious, who have seen the light and have returned to the fold and become, in this particular case, ultra-Orthodox. And those Jews are called chozrim b'tshuva or ba'alei tshuva, people who have returned to the fold of authentic Judaism. I think that unfortunately my answer has to be that I don't see any difference between the American ultra-Orthodox Jewish community and the Israeli ultra-Orthodox Jewish community as far as how the red carpet is put out for people who want to join the Jewish people, either as Jewish returnees to traditional Judaism or actual converts. And I think that this is one of the reasons that I wrote this book, was to bring this problem to the fore and to try to reason with my fellow Jews about how important it is, how many times the Torah tells you, God tells you that one of the most important mitzvot that a Jew can do is not to oppress the stranger, to welcome him, to not make him feel uncomfortable in any way. And it's a huge sin to remind a convert or a person who's newly Orthodox of their past. And this is something which the Torah condemns, probably more than any other sin. This is condemned. And so I think that this is unfortunately something that both communities have to work on. What are the
So we know that Shangela, the teenage girl, she felt having a convert join her family was the most shameful thing that could ever be. It would ruin her chances for a good shidduch. She worried that her friends would gossip. And there's one more clip from Miss Reagan that tells how she had a friend this really happened to and what happened after that and how she was accepted.
I am myself a Balat Tshuva. I come from a non-observant family, and it was my choice after my mother sent me for better English and math lessons to an Orthodox Hebrew day school in Far Rockaway, the Hebrew Institute of Long Island, and instead of just getting better English and math, I got a whole new lifestyle and decided to accept Orthodoxy as my own preferred way of living, and became extremely religious and eventually moved to Israel. So I guess in a certain sense, even though it happened when I was very young, you could say that I myself am a Balat Tshuva, someone who returned to Judaism. And so here I was with this famous story. And
Okay. I don't know if we heard the whole thing, but that's okay. Another core of the problem of the Orthodox Code presented was the Orthodox rule of keeping the fact of Zissel's mental illness and suicide secret. She wouldn't have been able to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. It would be considered a scandal and keep Shangela from getting a good shidduch or match. It would cause people to talk and pity the family. Fruma Esther said it would ruin the family's yachas to have a mother in a mental hospital. The rabbis were able to bend the rules in their case. Yaakov and his mother felt tremendous guilt for hiding it and not doing more for Zissel. Twice, Leah is devastated and disillusioned in the Orthodox faith when she is told not to return to the Lehman household. It was the only thing she really loved doing. It was making her feel alive and giving her life the meaning she was longing for. She was in love with the two younger children, and they were making her happy, and she realized how she longed for a family and children. When the volunteer who helped Fruma Esther after her eye surgery shared with Fruma Esther that her son had died of AIDS, and Esther had hidden her secret so long, Esther had a revelation. She was seeing the truth. This wonderful woman who helped her so much was full of chesed, would have been dismissed because she wasn't like the other in the community. From Esther felt angry, finally realizing how wrong it was, thinking people judge from the outside. God judged from the heart and saw into the heart. All the characters have some sort of revelation. Yaakov tells Leah the Orthodox reject people like her because they don't want outsiders to see what's really going on in there. She realizes the people she held in such high esteem and wanted to be so much alike were just regular people. Yaakov at one point realizes with heart-stopping fury that he had let his wife die to please others and their sense of propriety, and he was not going to let that happen again. He will marry who he wants next time. Shangela and not deal with the matchmakers. Shangela finally realizes after a talk with Bubby and a heart-wrenching scene at the cemetery where they go to visit Zissel, and Bubby tells her the real story of how her mother died and how much she loved her, and that she finally accepted Leah as a good match for Yaakov, that she was the Shekhinah for the family. We meet in the community devout and religious people dedicated to the Torah and its customs, but as human nature will have it, people are flawed. They make mistakes, they have regrets, they sometimes blame Hashem for the tragedies that befall them. They question their beliefs. This is about the Jewish people in the story, but there are universal themes here. Grief, forgiveness, friendship, and family, and the way that fate sometimes brings people together. Enough about Suris for a while. Let's talk about the lightheartedness in the book too, which I found that there was plenty. Poignant and funny at the same time, to me, is when, using her own words, speaking to God as if he's next to her at the lunch counter, she says to him, "Listen, I appreciate your taking your valuable time to hear me out, and I'm so incredibly grateful for everything you've done for me. But I have to admit I'm not doing so well lately." After what she'd been through, she told God she just wanted a little break, a little sunshine coming through the clouds. She says, some sign that he is there with her. Nothing grand, no splitting the sea or stopping the sun from setting, or just something, anything to give her the slightest bit of hope. She told him that she wanted to be part of these people, and this world so badly, but honestly, she told him, she wasn't mentioning any names, but some of these people just really aren't nice. There was the Passover Seder Lola finally convinced her mother to let her have. But her mother invited people from Guatemala and Cambodia because she said they had been on long journeys too, fraught with peril, just like the Jews did in Egypt. And she placed a very nice loaf of organic sourdough nut bread on the table next to the, as she put it, hard and edible cardboard matzah. There were many funny parts, I thought, especially the shidduch dates that they each had arranged for them. What characters they were. Leah was fixed up with an extremely overweight man, another who was on the autism spectrum with no social skills whatsoever, and a Black convert from Nigeria who was a conspiracy theorist. While Yaakov had to suffer through a woman who was so obsessive compulsive, she toilet trained her children at the age of 8 months and would never let the children sit in the living room. And she made homemade bibs and aprons that they had to wear all the time to catch the crumbs, any wayward crumbs. And another date who was divorced, as her husband had run off with his shiksa secretary, and she was so bitter, Yaakov was afraid she would kill her next day. He told the shadchan he was not after earthly pleasures, he just wanted a good woman to love and who would love his children. After all, the shadchans, who were themselves pieces of work, were assured a place in heaven if they made 3 matches, so they had an incentive. Leah's first matchmaker told her she was difficult and told her to dye her hair a normal color. Remember, it was wild strawberry blonde hair. Lose 10 pounds because men want skeletons, and to get a better bra and wear higher heels. Another told her to write a shidduch resume. Leah felt that instead of a headhunter, this shadchan was a womb hunter. I found one of Leah's new roommates, Devorah, extremely comical. She was speaking Yiddish with an Irish brogue, always exclaiming she was Delira and Exira. I thought that was hilarious. The Vort scene, which they finally make it to the engagement party, in the epilogue that describes all the characters we meet along our journey, makes one smile. Here's who was present. The woman in a sleeveless red dress with bleached blonde spiky hair, the man in the Sikh turban, the tall, beautiful black woman with marvelous hair, a large, fierce-looking Israeli in a knitted skull cap, and a young wig-wearing woman with an Irish accent, and a beautiful young woman, a rabbi's daughter, a doctor, who had herself become engaged to a convert and a divorcee, also a doctor. To think Leah and Yaakov overcame all the obstacles that were put in front of them, that all these people and we, the readers, did make it to a happy ending. Shehekian. You are probably tired of hearing me talk, so I may open it up now, either in chat or regular, because I want to ask you a question, a discussion question I found. Leah and Jacob and Rachel are biblical names. Remember, Rachel was his first shidduch date that he really did, he was attracted to. But after a few dates, she realized he wasn't for her, and he did really fall for her. But Leah and Jacob and Rachel, I wonder if anybody would like to say why they think the author chose those names and how the modern story relates to the biblical narrative. So anybody want to take a stab?
Leah and Rachel were both wives of Jacob, and Leah was the one he was married to first by trickery, and Rachel was the one he really wanted to marry and had to work longer in order to earn her hand in marriage.
Very good. But he did love Leah. I believe that he did love Leah too. Anybody else want to say anything? Okay. To me, there was just so much in this book. I hope I did not flit around too much, but there's so much backstory to each character and such interesting details and such a juicy story that it's really hard to cover it all. I didn't really touch too much on the adorable children that she called icy and cheeky, that she just was addicted to kissing them. She loved them so much. And they loved her from the beginning also. Even the attraction of Leah to Yaakov as she was volunteering in their home as an unpaid volunteer, and how that little love story grew. It was just wonderful. But telling about it doesn't do it justice. You really have to read it in Naomi's words. We find ourselves really caring about the characters and finding out if they succeed or fail in their attempt to overcome their society's prejudices. Like she says in her interview, Naomi manages to tell the story in a way that is both critical of its limitations and cognizant of its attractions. It's a difficult balancing act, but I think she succeeded very well. And I want to know if you also did. So we're going to talk about that at the end. So Donald Harris, let me just tell you the one interviewer, Donald H. Harrison. She's the editor of the San Diego Jewish World and author of many books, said about that An Unorthodox Match was a splendid book. He enjoyed reading it so much. But the pity of it will be that because Reagan is an author from the secular world, some people who might benefit from its insights, those in highly observant communities, are unlikely to read it. The good news is that Miss Reagan has just finished the sequel, her first, called An Unorthodox Wife, which picks up at the wedding, which takes the love story of Leah and Yaakov forward after the wedding. She said in her interview that she had to write the sequel because she just fell in love with the characters and she just had to know what happened. I know I can't wait, and who knows, it might become a series on Netflix too. So I hope you enjoyed the book, and if you want to tell any of your thoughts and ideas about it, we'll certainly be happy to hear it. And if you haven't read the book, I hope you do. It is very worth reading.
Sandy, that was just outstanding. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure that all of the 60 people who are on this Zoom call also appreciated it. It was magnificent. Bravo.
Well, thank you all, and I appreciate your kind words, but I would love for anybody else to offer anything about the book too.
I want to say that we had her at the book fair
Oh,
twice, I think, but by the second time, if I'm not mistaken, the Orthodox community didn't like her that much. I hope they've changed and they didn't come. But the first time we had a great turnout with everyone. So I don't know I hope that's changed over the years. But they really don't like us getting to know some of the problems that they have, like all communities have. But she has been to Houston.
okay.
Well, Sandy, you said her next book is already published in An Unorthodox Marriage.
Marriage, right, or wedding, marriage.
Okay.
I've read all of her books. I own a lot of them in hardback, although this I read on Kindle, and she's really opened my eyes to the windows of the Orthodox, and others. The women seem to have so many struggles in this Orthodox world, but she takes us how they find themselves.
I know that I found this book so interesting because I've read so many books that were so negative about the Orthodox. And this was the first book I've read that shows both sides so clearly, the good, the bad, the really spiritual, and the people that were very tacky. And I thought it was just such a great insight that I really felt this was a book I really learned. And I had learned and read so many others, but this one really was objective and showed you both sides so well. I really liked it. Thank you, Sandy.
What about our survey? Did we get the results from that, David?
You canceled out the survey earlier, so unfortunately I don't have the ability to repost it. Someone did by mistake.
Oh, okay, all right.
The other
But it was unanimous that people loved the book.
Pardon?
It was unanimous that people loved the book.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Very glad to hear that. Well, I certainly enjoyed it, and I learned quite a bit of reading this book. So
I want to say something, Sandy. Oh, sorry. The other pressure that they have is they have to be great cooks and set the table beautifully, and their children always have to look beautiful, and they now look beautiful too. They're, and they exercise, and from what I understand, they have a lot of stress with their Friday night. They have to make the challah, they have to make everything from scratch. My sister-in-law, who was religious, would order food, and when her daughter-in-laws came into the family, they did away with that. She had to start cooking. And Thursday night is a very hard night in their life because they're cooking for Shabbos. So they have a lot of stress, I think, a lot of pressure to keep up with everyone else And if you can't keep up, you get depressed, I'm sure.
Really,
You
really.
know, I follow on Instagram a very ultra orthodox cook. She wrote the cookbook Peas, Love, and Carrots, if anyone is familiar with it. It's Moroccan kosher recipes, and she lives in Jerusalem. She is very frum. She's either wearing a shtitel or her, like, all you can see is her forehead, no hair. Um, and she just had her 7th child this week. And you know, her mother has been visiting, and her mother was doing some of the cooking, and she was talking about what a relief it was to have her mother there helping with the cooking for Shabbat, because, you know, with all of those children, and they have to eat from Friday night through Saturday at sundown, and she's not going to start cooking Saturday at sundown because the kids are going to be getting ready to go to bed. So it's a lot of food prep, and she does every week. She does like a Shabbat roundup, and she shows you all the food that she has made, and it's astounding the work that goes into it. It's just astounding. And I have really enjoyed following her for many of the same reasons. First of all, her recipes are fantastic. And second, just watching her life and what she does on a day-to-day basis, living in this community, has been very eye-opening to me, especially while reading this book and following her. I could relate to it a little bit better.
You know, another beautiful part of the book that was the grandmother that was such a biased person. When she went to have her cataract surgery, she walked there because she didn't want to bother anybody, if you remember the book. And the woman that was a social worker, when she was time to go home, they asked her, you know, someone coming for you? And she said, oh no, I can walk home. And the woman said, no, I'll take you home. And she drove her home. And that she said, you have to come back tomorrow. How are you going to do that? Oh, I'll walk, she said. And the woman said, no, I'll come back and I'll take you. She was not a Jewish woman. And the grandmother, who was so orthodox and so biased, made a good friend of this woman, and it changed her mind a lot. That really was a changer for her and for her future daughter-in-law.
Right.
But it was really a very nice thing to interject, to see how the outside community could have done that, you know, with.
Yeah, that's the one she said was so full of chesed.
Yeah, full of sense.
So kind and so good to help her, and she
couldn't believe
out
it.
of the goodness of her heart. Right.
I think this is the first book that deals with these topics that I've read that lays out exactly what an Orthodox Jewish man does. They allude to it, but I've never read anything like that before. They study, that's it, and their wives have to support them.
I thought, having gone to United Orthodox synagogues, I had seen the ultra Orthodox, but I wasn't that familiar with it. And I had no idea about the prejudice. I was very shocked with that. And as a matter of fact, if Yaakov's mother-in-law hadn't been such an important person, she couldn't have gotten everybody to come to the wedding and start to see the difference in Leah. Nobody would have accepted her.
The United Orthodox Synagogue is modern Orthodox. They're not ultra Orthodox.
Right, but there are some there. But that was the only experience I'd ever had with them. So
I thought it was kind of amazing that Yaakov would go to her apartment and wait on the stairs for her. That's so unlike an Orthodox man, I should think.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of really surprised me, but it was very poignant.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't true that no Orthodox men work and they just study. many Orthodox men do work. Many
Yes.
Orthodox men have professions, and many Orthodox men go to school and get advanced degrees. It's not that all Orthodox men have their wives supporting them. It really is not. And I think even this book made clear that Jacob was going to get a job. I mean, he was going to get a degree and he was going to work.
He had to. He had
He
to.
had to. He was not going to be a schnorrer. He was going to work, but he needed her income in
Right.
order to be able to go to school because, you know, there had to be some income coming in. He had children. And but Orthodox men do work. It's not that all of them don't.
No,
And
and-
that would be an
and-
unfair characterization, I think.
Well, in her interview, one other place, everybody should really listen to the whole interview because Naomi says how the people in New York and Israel, the men definitely work. They work in those camera stores in New York. And
Yeah.
Right. And
So-
jewelry and jewelry stores
diamonds, yes.
and diamond stores. That
They do.
yes, they
Yeah,
do.
I want to say something. There's a lot of these young men go to yeshiva in Lakewood, New Jersey. So apparently there's a rabbi there that is now telling them they have to learn a trade. They have to get educated. And because they're so good with Talmud, he's encouraging them to be accountants, driving them from the yeshiva to Manhattan to take classes.
Yes.
And so they are now, you know, finally, they're encouraging them that they need to have a job. They need to work.
Yes.
They can't sit and learn all day anymore. Thank God.
But, you know, they have those ultra-Orthodox schools in Brooklyn, and I saw all the school buses, everything's Hebrew. And a lot of the problem is in these Orthodox schools, they get money, but they don't, like one school got money to buy computers and they spent it on buses. And the kids do not learn to read English. They don't learn science and social studies. All they are taught is they speak Yiddish. It's that they're very insulated and super uneducated.
Well, Ed and I went on a Melton, Israel seminar that showed us the wide variations in the Haredi, from the ultra-Orthodox to the ultra-ultra to the ones who are much more open and responsive and receptive to the modern world. And that's, I think, what you would find wherever you go. But in this case, I thought it was very nicely balanced. So with that, I think we're going to say, Sandy, all 51 of us on this Zoom conference, which I think is the biggest we've ever had, so appreciate all the time and effort that you put into this book review. It was outstanding. Bravo.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Everybody, I'll see
you.
Okay.
the 11th, if not sooner.
Thank you so much.
Was wonderful, Sandy.
Thank you all. Thank you. Have a good evening and read it if you have not read it.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
If anyone needs it, I have put the registration link in the chat for the next book review. It helps to register in advance because that way I know to send you the link. We had a few people who said they never got the link. It's because they never registered. So again, strongly encourage you to register for the book review. I will send out the link on the day of. Okay.